Buck Brignac is going to be talking about the year-end updates, and so I'm going to pass the ball over to him. But this is actually the final skill session for 2022. We'll pick back up in 23, but and this is usually our most popular one. So, Buck, take it away.
Thanks, Alice. Welcome, everyone. We'll try to go through a little bit of some preparation work for year end. This is always kind of a hot topic for everyone out there, and it's a good reminder, I guess, to make sure we're kind of looking at all the pieces that we should be for our particular installations. We'll be going over a number of things during the session, and hopefully one of these items pretty much will perk your interest and help you get through your year end with a little less stress as it comes through the holidays. Looking at some of the software updates, Great Plains will provide a year-end update, okay, coming out pretty much in the middle of actually scheduled for November 15th. So that should be out. This year-end update is usually applied to all of our Great Plains installations, mostly for the payroll updates. But there's other things that are out there that we really need to pay attention to also. Most of our clients on GP and everybody really should be on the modern life cycle. So hopefully you should be applying at least one update a year. The year-end update is the one that a lot of people will wait for, but there's also 2 other updates that come out during the year to add in some new functionality that comes into play. But for the payroll people, especially those, with payroll customers, they would want to be able to get that year-end update. You also need to look and paying attention to our Windows updates out there on your servers and your workstations. Make sure that those items are staying up to date. The updates that are out there, normally there's a 5-year or so cycle pretty much for mainstream support. And then after that, the products usually go into a 5-year extended support. And some of those support then after that extended are going to say, hey, I'm not going to provide you any more security updates. So you want to make sure that everything is getting updated properly. Even with the Great Plains part, your SQL updates, okay, are very important. A lot of people are still running on SQL 2012 and 2014, which those are going to be expiring with their extended updates. So we really need to be on SQL 2016 or higher for all of these annual updates to really take a full effect and get your systems up and going. And last but not least, on your software, you want to make sure you test out your backups, that you have good backups that are actually working. And now that we've got through most of hurricane season here in Louisiana, we were very lucky. We didn't have a lot of clients, whatever, who had kind of lost a lot of information with relating to hurricane parts, but those backups are really critical. And the last thing you want to do is to get through and need those backups and then find out that they're haven't actually been working and you're losing data. So with the Dynamics GP, it's important that you go through and actually schedule your dates for these year-end steps that you want to be able to get through. Make sure that you have a good schedule. You can get through it and put it on a schedule to get your reconciliations all done on a timely fashion. You're reconciling submodules for your general ledger to the AP part, the AR, my inventory, fixed assets, and payroll. All of these should hopefully be reconciled on a monthly basis, but sometimes, depending on time and resources, they're only done on a quarterly basis or even sometimes on a yearly. So make sure you put it on your schedule, okay, to get those reconciliations performed. And you can actually perform them before year end, hopefully, and then your final year end one was just really updating your last month's activity. But if you can get them reconciled ahead of time, it makes that year end a lot less stressful. Make sure that you're completing your final reports, okay, at year end. So those that are going to be needed to be filed on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis, especially as payroll is concerned. And another thing you want to do is to check out the year-end blog series that's done by Microsoft Dynamics. Terry Healy puts this out annually. There's a link there on our slides that you'll be able to get this slide deck afterwards. But you can also, go out to the communitydynamics.com/GP and search just for that GP 2022 year-end blog that Terry Healy provides. And it's got a lot of great information for you. That blog will start being updated later this month with links into it for a quick session each day on here's how to do this part of your year end and the next step. So fantastic display, pretty much, and presentation by Terry every year. You can actually go out and search for the 2021 one, and you'll see that blog is still out there with a lot of good links to last year's information. But she's going to go ahead and continue that blog this current year. So again, footnote that kind of link there to the community and the dynamics, make sure that you can kind of catch up on those things that are going to be happening. The GP 2022 year-end update, okay, is scheduled to release, as I said, in November 15th. Hopefully that will be on time. Normally, it is. They haven't been having a lot of changes, whatever, into the system. There was an update that was released. The two standard updates were released for Great Plains. There was one in October 22 that was released. Didn't have a lot of hiccups or whatever that it caused on the upgrade process, but included a lot of new features out there, including one important one for year-end purposes, the printing of 1099 NEC forms. The forms now will print out with the boxes in the lines all together, right on plain paper, on blank paper, so that you don't have to go out and buy pre-printed forms for those this year. They will come straight out of Great Plains, ready to be mailed out to your customers. This year-end update, okay, is going to be valid, and you're going to have all of those updates there, features or whatever, for everything except for GP 2016. So if you are still running on that version of Great Plains, you are not going to have a year-end update. So you're not going to get any of these new features. So the updates that are all coming out are going to be inclusive of everything that's priorly been updated, including all of the version 18.2, 3, 5, and 4 and 5 sessions. So make sure you're on one of those latest releases or get scheduled so that you can take advantage of these updates that are going to be coming in there. Our year-end closing steps, we're going to follow along here pretty much into our session here. I was going to talk firstly on the sales order processing, purchase order processing, and inventory, followed by payables management, receivables management. Opposite there, receivables, then payables, fixed assets, payroll, and then closing my year end on the general ledger. On the inventory module, closing that year end, the main steps that happen on that, of the closing of that, it basically takes those summarized current year costs, quantities, sales amounts relating to the transaction items, and basically keeps those summarized sales histories numbers up to date for you. The year-end close, it updates my beginning quantities to the quantity on hand amounts for each one of your sites, which is usually necessary for really accurate turnover reports to see how much your inventory is turning over. My also zeroes out the quantity sold and the quantity fields for as far as my year-to-date information on those fields. And it really must be completed before your new year transactions are posted out there. That way, those year-to-date numbers will get properly allocated to the current year that they're happening. The steps usually on the inventory, is to really make sure you post all your transactions that you have outstanding, okay, in the current year. So on your invoicing, my sales order processing and purchasing, and all of those items pretty much will need to be posted. That way everything gets properly allocated into the year. There's always a good idea to make a backup, okay, after we get all of that postings are done, and then go through that reconciliation process prior to my closing of the inventory. Usually we go out and reconcile my sales orders, my purchase orders, and my inventories. Okay, and you'll see the links there to go into utilities and how to run each one of those. Okay, my reconcile functionality, I think my next step has this here. So when I'm looking at my reconcile on my sales order processing, okay, and you'll see some wording in there, kind of talks a little bit about remove completed documents, okay, on my sales orders. Okay, the system will not remove them out of the system. It basically is going to remove them out of that open status and put them in over to the history status. So your reconcile functionality just takes things and organizes them, put those historical ones into separate tables. That way, when you're running your current reports, those reports will run a lot faster with a lot less data in those current fields. The historical ones will sit on the side, still available to be able to go in and run reports and inquiries, but don't be too confused when you're looking at the reconcile functionality and wording pretty much that is there. It is really just moving those documents, the completed documents, to history. It's not going to remove them out of the system. However, we do know that sometimes hiccups happen. That's why that backup facility pretty much is usually a good idea, to make a backup before it, run your reconciles, and make sure that there's no corrupted data in the system that causes things to accidentally get deleted. We have seen that happen, but it's been many years since it's happened. But you just never know when certain things are going to creep up on you because of corrupted data. So be on the safe side always. Make backups before you run your reconcile utilities. On the purchase order side, you also see that it's going to move the completed purchase orders when it runs that. There's a setup there, not only just on the reconcile, but basically to remove completed purchase orders. It's not going to move them out of the system. It's basically going to take those completed ones and move them over into the history status, make sure that they're sitting in the right tables. That's usually under your routines, can remove completed purchase orders. This there pretty much usually can be run on a quarterly basis. It just makes things a little bit easier to have the proper transactions segregated into the tables to make your current reports run a lot faster and smoother with less data in the current files. And when you do need to run those historical reports, they're all there. The reports are all designed to say, let me look at my history tables and my open tables when I'm running all of my historical reports, and properly run those to get accurate data. With the inventory, okay, there's always that step that you should be taking, this, especially if you're going through an audit processes, to make sure that you have a physical inventory count. It's great if you can take these inventory accounts prior to your year end, but sometimes it's not feasible. But that's one of the things that you want to schedule and make sure you have a good schedule for, where everything on that year-end close of inventory, I'm taking that physical count, plan on, I've got to have nobody in the system, okay, selling things as I'm going out or receiving things as we're counting. So complete those physical counts, print out your inventory reports. Once you've got all of that reconciled back and adjusted, you want to go in and do your year-end close on the inventory through the routines of the year-end close. Okay, there is no year-end closing report from the inventory module for some reason. It's still not available, I don't believe. So you want to make sure that you're watching the things. You go ahead and you close it. Nobody else is in the system, and keep an eye on your process monitor in the Great Plains under that Dynamics process monitor. When you start that year-end closing, you'll see that the process is gone, and once it's finished, that drops off and there's nothing happening. But normally you would get a report out of the system saying, hey, it's finished, I'm complete. This is one area where I don't believe has been updated yet. So hopefully in the future, that will get there. Once inventory, you've got that close process done, it's very important then to go into your closed fiscal periods, okay, and click off the module for inventory so that no more transactions get recorded into the year after you've done all your year-end closing. On the receivables management side, there's usually two year-end procedures that are there, one for your calendar year and one for your fiscal year. So if you do have separate fiscal versus calendars set up in your system, you will go through 2 separate steps. And basically it's going to track pretty much your year-to-date fields and your life-to-date fields and make sure that those numbers there are populated properly. If you do the fiscal close, there's 2 different buckets, whatever. So to look at those numbers for your fiscal year-to-date versus your calendar year-to-date on the sales side. So you will go through those 2 steps. One of the things you want to make sure, okay, you're posting all transactions for the current year. Again, timing is everything on this. Usually the first things you want to do in your current year is to make sure you get all your billings done. Once your product is out and you've done your physical counts, make sure you get everything billed properly and billed in the proper year and get those transactions posted and as quickly as possible before you do your year-end, your closing. All your month-end, complete all those month-end procedures on the receivable side, which usually is going to be balancing out your subledger to your general ledger for your current aging reports, but that also might include in your sending out of end of the month statements. So if that's part of your process, make sure all of those month-end processes, any finance charges that you're adding in, all those are standard month-end procedures. Make sure those are all done and completed. Review pretty much the unapplied documents report. That's under that report, sales analysis, unapplied documents. You want to review that, make sure that your aging looks pretty much accurate and that you don't have things hanging out there that's not been applied, just to make your aging reports and your statements look a little cleaner. Make sure everything is properly applied in there and get you a good clean aging for your year-end process. Again, kind of the steps there. Once we go through these processes, right before I'm going to do that close year, make a backup. Okay, and normally it's on these schedules that we're doing, it's a good idea to kind of maybe do close in 1 module or 2 modules left pretty much, there. Close out those, make your backups. Okay, next day do the same thing and get separate backups if you need to. Sometimes getting the backups, okay, is not as easy. You might not have control over it, so get together with your IT department and get a schedule together so that way in case you need certain things, you have that day available for you in case something goes wrong. Cross your fingers. It hasn't been happening in the last few years, so we're looking good on that. Basically, on my calendar year, if you're running the same calendar year as a fiscal year, you want to just mark the all and you'll close them all at the same time, both at the same time. It'll update my year-end reports. And once again done with the receivables, go into my fiscal periods in the system and close that module off so that nobody can then go in and make adjustments, whatever, after you've done your close. One other step after that close part, you'll see that under receivables management and your routines, there's a step is to go ahead and move your closed invoices to history. Okay, it's called sales routines paid transaction removal. Doesn't really remove transactions, it really moves transactions from your open tables to your historical tables. So it's going to be the information is there, but it allows then for you to run your current reports in this current month, current age. You're running with less transactions in the open tables, so your reports run a lot faster. And all the items will then move to history during this process, move to the history tables, all there for your inquiry purposes. When you're running, especially historical reports, you're going to always look at my history tables in my open tables to make sure you're getting accurate information. Payables management pretty much also has that same 2-year procedures for looking at my fiscal versus calendar. One of the things you want to make sure you have that calendar close up, okay, updates not only just my year-to-date information for calendar purposes, but it updates the 1099 amount fields. Fiscal updates pretty much everything else. So when you're looking at it, if you're looking at those reports, okay, especially looking at numbers that are in your SmartList reports, those year-to-date fields and life-to-date, last year fields, okay, those 2 fields get populated during this year-end process. If you don't run a payables year-end close, it's not that critical. Same thing on the sales, it's not as critical Just a matter of don't rely on those year-to-date and last year numbers that are coming into those reports, because if you don't do a close, those numbers just keep accumulating and keep growing. So important that if you are looking at all of those fields in any of your reports, that you actually go through a year-end close process on the receivables and payables. Make sure you've got all your purchasing transactions posted through the system. Reconcile your aging trial balance. Make sure everything looks looking good on there. Make a backup, okay, again, and then run your payables reconcile, okay, and usually you want to run that reconcile after you have a backup. That reconcile report, you can reconcile the different numbers there. Your reconcile features, okay, within Great Plains normally looks at the detail and says, hey, here's my detail behind all of these summary numbers that are in the system, and make sure that those summary numbers are actually adding up to the detail that's behind it. So it's kind of important to run these reconciles. The reconciles will update all of my summary numbers and make sure that there's data, that back up those numbers when you're pulling reports from all kinds of different areas. All reports will basically kind of still summarize and give you the same information. So print your report option. Okay, when you're printing out after the reconcile, most of these do have the reports to be able to print it and send those to at least a screen and print them out to files so that you have that capabilities to capture it. Might not want to send it out to the printer, send it to a screen first. If it's only a couple of pages, that's great, but sometimes you might show up with a 300-page report that you really don't want to send to a printer. So you go to the screen first, and once it's there to the screen, from the screen, you can usually print it out to a file. Looking at part of your payables management is verifying your 1099 information. Under the purchasing pane, okay, under routines and your print 1099, there's two print buttons. There's one for printing the forms, but there's also the print button to the right of that you usually want to choose and print, okay, your edit list for 1099 information. That'll give you what's going to be printed on your 1099s. See if somebody has a wrong setting in the system for their 1099s. Give you some dollar figures that you can go out and verify. Very important, though, to print this first edit list report to see what is available, what settings are there for your vendors. On that, if you do have any issues or whatever with your 1099s, that information is usually gathered together from the individual transactions, okay, and summarized in the summary numbers. If for some reason something is set wrong on one of those transactions, and it's one that you can kind of capture right there to identify, you can go into the edit 1099 transaction information. It's under the transactions, and edit that information. And from there, you'll be able to see the individual transactions that are there, with boxes those are going into. And if you need to make any changes on the transactions, you can go ahead and change that, whether it's the type or the dollar figure, those 1099 amounts. You can make those changes at a transaction level. That way it'll update pretty much your 1099 properly, okay, for the vendor that you're looking at. If you don't have transactions really that back up your 1099, those transactions aren't there, and you need to do any 1099 information and print 1099s without transactions to back it up, you could go in, okay, and select the vendor and select them on the 1099 details, okay, for that vendor under cards 1099, and actually update the 1099 numbers there. One caveat is what you're doing here is you're updating the summary numbers, okay, for that particular vendor, and that doesn't have any transactions associated with those summary numbers. So what will happen then is if you edit these numbers in the system and then you come back behind and says, let me run the reconcile, well, the reconcile is going to look for transactions that make up those numbers. And if those transactions are not there, it'll usually wipe out that amount for that 1099 field. So just be careful if you're going in and editing 1099 information, okay, in the system. Just realize that if you run the reconcile on that particular vendor afterwards, it's going to probably zero out those fields because it doesn't find the transactions. So that's the one caveat of going in at a vendor level and just updating numbers to be able to print my 1099s without the transactions that are there to back it up. Once you've got all your reconciliation part done and your edit list and you're happy with the numbers that are showing up for all of the reports, you can then go into your routines for the print 1099s and actually select the types, whatever that you have for it, whether it's non-employee compensation or miscellaneous, and print what boxes that information needs to go in. One of the nice things you're seeing here, okay, and on this window there's within non-employee compensation, you now have a new print form called a box. I can't read that, but it's one wide per file. Okay, select that type and that'll print out the new 1099 NEC forms with all the boxes right out pretty much of Great Plains, and you don't have to fit that into the pre-printed forms like you would on the regular 1099 miscellaneouses. So only the NEC ones are the ones that are going to come with the boxes already out of the system. As far as on magnetic media reporting and filing these 1099 information, okay, Great Plains does not handle that e-filing currently, but there's other softwares. Green Shades Accounting does handle that. I think also Atrix is another one that's out there that does handle 1099 filing electronically. So you need information on any of that. If you've got more than the minimum amount needed, just ask one of the consultants and we can probably put you in touch with a couple of options on how to get that information out electronically. Like I said earlier, pretty much on the October release, you can now print your 1099 boxes. This is kind of what it's going to look like. You're going to have one page pretty much coming out per form. Select the NEC type when you're printing, and it's going to now have everything for you. Then take that form, cut it short if you want, or just fold up the piece of paper and be able to put it in an envelope, send it out to your vendors. Last steps, as kind of reminder, make a backup. Okay, after you've done all your reconciliation, get everything out there, go ahead and go through the close under the routines, the year-end close part. Once the close is there, you usually will get a closing report, and then go into your fiscal periods for the payables and close those fiscal periods. Okay, one note, okay, that I can go through and close all of these items pretty much, okay, yet I don't have to print my 1099s. The printing of the 1099 part is really unrelated. It used to be that you used to have to print your 1099s before the closings, but because it is date sensitive and it knows that I'm going to calculate my 1099 information, okay, based off the date of the transactions now, you don't have to wait, print those 1099s before the close. You can close your year, done everything balancing, and then sometimes later in January, when you're ready to print those out, you can come back in and actually print those 1099s. Next item we'll look at is on the fixed assets. A lot of times this is one of the areas that kind of slides by my year-end process. It kind of waits to the orders when we have to go in and look at my transactions, okay, for my fixed assets. One of the steps you definitely want to make, is make sure I'm completed my payables year-end close and those payables items before I go in and close my fixed assets. We want to make sure that all assets are recorded properly, paid for in the proper year, so that therefore it's going to hit your year-end fixed assets general ledger balances. So therefore, once my payables is closed, my numbers are usually pretty accurate after that. You want to double check, make sure on your fixed assets that you'll be able to take through and do a roll forward. So you have your last year's ending balances, add my additions, okay, back out my retirements, make sure all of that information is posted properly. Run your depreciation on all your assets and on all your books that you have set up in Great Plains. Print those reports, okay, make sure everything balances out. Ensure that you have your fixed assets calendar is built correctly. So there's a separate calendar that is in the system. Most of the time it mirrors the regular calendar, your fiscal calendar that you have in the system. Make sure that that's set up correctly and the quarters are set up properly. Once all of that looks good, again, we go ahead and we'll make a backup. And then after that backup, routines, fixed assets, my year-end close. verify that it populates correctly, that the current fiscal year is the correct year that you're closing. You insert each book during that process of which ones you want to close out, click continue, and it's going to go through that process of actually closing out my year to date. Okay, fixed assets. It's going to, those year to date numbers are now going to be zeroed out, rolled into my accumulated depreciation numbers properly, and then prepare the next year for my next year's depreciation expense. Make sure you print that year-end closing report that comes out with it also. All right, moving right along, the important parts for a lot of people, especially those with payroll, just make sure, okay, we get to that payroll part, okay, that we do have some good backups in the system. In case, like I said, we're going to go through pretty much on a lot of your backups. Make sure that the reports and all of that, your whole system, you really want to make sure you have backed up. Check that latest year-end updates, pretty much Terry Healy's blog that we talked about earlier. Okay, before you do your payroll part, make sure you go ahead and check that blog and that there's no updates or whatever that have come out since the release that's going to be there in November 15th. If anything is there, if they run in, if any, the early adopters pretty much on the updates find any errors, they will usually get those fixed out very quickly and put those out, and she'll make note of that usually on the blog that, hey, we found issues with this type of transactions maybe happening. You might want to pull the latest release of the update. Doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened in the past, and they're usually very, very responsive to those things that are customer specific, maybe, and making sure that it doesn't happen to everybody out there, to get them fixed quickly and get everything back to where they need to be. Go ahead and run your reconcile utility, okay, under the payroll part. Again, after your backup's done, run that reconcile utility and make sure that you should come out with a blank report. If you don't, that reconcile utility has options out there, whether to just print a report first or to reconcile it and print the report. You might just want to run the report first, make sure that nothing is going to be changing out there that you're not expecting. If you do see changes, you might want to research it a little bit and find out what happened on those changes before you run your final reconcile. Once you do, if you do identify anything that reconcile report's clean, then you're ready to go ahead and complete any kind of final pay runs that you needed to do in Great Plains. Make sure you complete all your month end and your quarter end reports. You've done all those reconciliations. Then after all of that, you want to make sure we go through and we install that year-end update that is applied. This year-end update, and there's two things that's kind of confusing sometimes with people. There's the payroll, the year-end update, which updates the system so that it's going to take care of any changes that need to take place with W-2 processing. And there's also a year-end table update, the tax table update that happens afterwards. You want to run your year-end upgrade, do all your reports pretty much there to make sure if there's any changes. One nice thing this year is they haven't identified any changes that the IRS has requested or made changes to any W-2s and any of the reporting parts. So it's probably the first time in a long time that we haven't had any W-2 changes into the system. However, there are some 1099 changes, but W-2s, that's pretty good. So you're going to create, once you install that year-end update, you want that update in place before you go in and create your year-end wage file. That way, but because there's no updates, it shouldn't make a big difference, but you want to make sure it does update all the fields properly so that that information is there. And after that year-end wage report, okay, files are created, you'll then go in and print out your W-2 information and validate that. Make sure that that W-2 information totals at the last page of that is correct, that those numbers that are on that wage file are the same numbers that you would take if you go in and you add together your 4-quarter 941 reports. They should tie out. If they don't, we probably need to take a look and figure out what has caused the issues or whatever with that. Go ahead and any other additional companies that you have and databases you have, make all your backups there, because this will be one of your final backups that you want to do. Complete any specific tasks you have during your processes for your particular company on your W-2s. Okay, once all of that is done and balanced out, then you would go ahead, prior to your first 2023 pay run, you would go ahead and download pretty much the payroll tax table update. That is something that is usually done from within Great Plains. It's one of the options there to install the new update tables. These tables, tax tables, okay, will then usually come in and drop out any changes to the withholding rates, also changes to the maximum amount of the Social Security withholdings, those updates. So you want to make sure that that is in place before you run that 2023 pay run, especially if you have any large pay runs that are coming into play in the month of January. Sometimes those bonus runs are coming in that first of the month. Sometimes those bonuses will exceed the Social Security maximum amount. So you want to make sure that you've got the proper maximum set up by the tax tables before you run that pay run. Also, okay, if applicable, we want to confirm all of our latest ACA rules and processes that are taking place with that. Once those files are there and everything done, okay, you step to print the 1090, the W-2s and your 1099 files. Okay, all of that's usually at the end of January. That's all due. A lot of times people are waiting. They'll wait and see what that information, okay, if any changes or whatever take place, and print that mid-January. Some people will do it the 1st of January. So it's up to you how you handle that. But make sure we can go ahead and print that. Again, the W-2s will come straight out of the box, on plain paper for Great Plains now. So you don't have to go out and buy pre-printed forms. There's also some other tools that are all out there available for you for doing any electronic filing that you might need to be doing too. And there are also third-party ISVs. If you're doing any ACA reporting, okay, those are still listed there on our screen. Any assistance you need with any of this, hopefully you've always been contacting the consultants that we deal with here, your personal consultant, but a lot of times we go out on an annual basis at the end of the year to make sure if anybody needs any help, we're here for you. So for some reason, okay, you create that year-end wage file and now you're finding some issues or whatever, just know that you can remove that wage file and redo it. Okay, you don't have to just update the 1090, the W-2 form. If you have that availability and you got the time to make those changes on the other things, usually you can go back in, make your adjustment. Basically going to remove the year-end wage file. Okay, go back, make the adjustments to payroll that you need. Maybe something was taxable and it shouldn't have been non-taxable, those type of adjustments. Make those adjustments into the payroll system for that particular employee, and then recreate your wage file again, and then run your W-2s off of that new one. So you can kind of go through and remove those. You can also process your payroll for the new year before you got that year-end close process completed. Okay, it does work well, now in these later years that they've done some upgrades. If you're processing your payroll, okay, for the new year while you're still in December, okay, make sure you change your user date, okay, when you're doing that build, calculate, and print and post, because it's going to want to utilize a lot of times December dates and put those dates in December, but yet the check, okay, is going to be a 2023 check. That's just make sure you're on top of that. Any questions you have with any of those steps or trying to make these fixes, again, we're here as your consultants to try to help you make that process easy. Again, my note payroll, I'm going to update, okay, my payroll tax tables afterwards. Be aware if got any changes to the W-4. We haven't been notified of any of those changes this year, so we might be good. Update after you've got your new payrolls ready, you're going to update your SUTA and your FUTA tax rates before your posting of your first period end reports in Great Plains. Normally that's done at the end of the month. So make sure those rates are updated. That way it calculates the right amount of the FUTA and SUTA liability. You want to adjust any kind of year-end maximums that might be coming into play for your 401k deductions and stuff. and adjust any benefit or deduction, any kind of pay period, any of those rates. Make sure those items get adjusted as you're coming into the new year. All right, last but not least, my general ledger. Okay. This is always the final module to be closed. Okay, you want to make sure if you're doing the closings on all your other systems, all the other modules, all those other ones need to be closed before you do your final GL close part. Make sure you go through, like I said, all the other modules. Make sure you've got ample disk space. Okay, when you go through that year-end process, depends on the amount of transactions, general ledger transactions. It's gonna generate pretty much a pretty nice size temporary files and temporary fields or whatever, where it moves items out of the open tables again into the history tables for general ledger, puts them there in the temporary tables while it does its roll forwards or my balance forwards on my balance sheet and into my P&Ls to the retained earnings. So it takes up a good bit of space there, and you want to make sure that you're really not at a critical part. If you go through pretty much this year-end close and that basically happens, it's going to cause you some headaches. Let me tell you that. It's going to stop it. It's not going to close it. We will be restoring from a backup and then trying to redo this again. So make sure you take a look at that and your disk space on your systems, whatever. You want to make sure you posted all the transactions for the current year, that you got all of those in there. Verify your posting types. Okay, when you're looking at the general ledger close and you look at your accounts, the GL accounts, there's a type, pretty much the posting type is set to either balance sheet or P&L. By default, when you add a new account, okay, when you open that window, it's going to default into balance sheet. And if you're adding a P&L account and you don't make that change, it's going to have it set wrong. This is the one time of the year where you have to make sure that posting type is right. Balance sheet types will roll forward those balances into the next year's beginning balance. P&L types will roll those balances, zero them out pretty much for the next year, roll those balances into your retained earnings. If those settings are correct or incorrect, it will make the wrong adjustments for you, and we'll have to go back in. Luckily, there is now capabilities to undo my close, okay, make changes if I need to, and reclose it again. So it's not really as critical as it used to be in way past years. A system, they have really made some great advancements to help that year-end close part. With that said, though, you'd like to make it as accurate as possible. So make sure you do look at those posting settings. Under the help menu, there is parts there, and for the general ledger, here's my year-end steps. It kind of talks about how to do that. You utilize the smart list reports that are there, pretty much under the smart list, financial and accounts, and pull your list of accounts and look at the types and just sort them back and forth. Make sure that those settings are correct. It's the easiest way to usually test to make sure that those are accurate. Once that's there, go ahead and close. You run the close for the fiscal periods. Okay, after that close, you usually make a backup again just to have an after year backup. One of the things is that year-end close process, do not interrupt it. Press it once, be patient, wait for it. Depends on the amount of transactions that are there and going through. You definitely want to let it complete to its ending. When you're looking at your general ledger settings, okay, one of those items that are out there, and I have this question come up a lot of times when people do, I need to close my year. I don't want to close my year until I get the audit reports, my auditors are finished in case I need to make any adjustments. Even though you close the fiscal year, your calendar year and fiscal year, even though you do close that, you can go back and make adjustment entries back to that one previous year before. So you'll see that under my general ledger settings, under the financial pane, financials general ledger. Okay, there's an option there in the middle, posting to history. Normally we would want that item to be unchecked because we don't want anybody just going in and posting an item to a prior year. But it does have the capability so that if you click on that box there to allow me to post the history, and I go into my fiscal periods and open up the general ledger period that I want to be able to make a general ledger entry to, open that up. It will allow me to go ahead and key a transaction, any audit adjustments you have back to that year, and automatically roll that adjustment into the beginning balances for the current year. Or if it's a P&L side, it'll roll that adjustment entry into my retained earnings. So you don't have to wait, okay, until the end of the year till your audit or adjustments of income through before you actually close the year. This closing of the year too, okay, until you do your general ledger close, okay, if you look at your inquiry numbers pretty much on your general ledger accounts, it's not going to show a balance forward. So if you're trying to reconcile accounts, reconcile balances after year end, so next January, and if you haven't closed yet, you'll have to go in and take December's ending balance and add it to the activity for that January to get to your true balance. It makes your reconciliation processes a lot more difficult, an extra step in there, still doable, but realize, let's go ahead and close these periods normally and let those balances roll forward with that understanding that we can go back in and make those adjustment entries afterwards during the current year, back to that 1 year. Make sure you do also have a new year set up. Okay, once you do close the year, okay, it'll usually, I think, prompt you pretty much for that next year to be available there. If not, it's like, hey, my year's not there. You'll have to go in under your fiscal periods and set up that new fiscal year for things to show up properly in your general ledger. The closing part, so it's under your routines, financial, year-end closing. Okay, choose the button to close that year. Only click it once. Be patient. Okay, if it's run, sometimes if it's going to take a long time, you want to run it overnight. Be sure that no one else is kind of in there also doing other transactions, that there's no scheduled backups or something that will interfere with that closing process. Hopefully, once you've done a year-end close, you know how long it usually takes. Sometimes it's only taken a few minutes. Sometimes it depends, if you've got lots of transactions or really old systems that take a little slower, don't have the availability on the memory, it could take a little longer. So be prepared pretty much. If you haven't been through that part before, like I said, just be patient with it. You do have, when your little process part that shows, hey, here's the steps. So once I do the close, it's going to kind of display what steps are there going on in process, and the report will print out afterwards. Make sure when you're closing, okay, the year-end close report, go ahead and print that out, save it to a PDF, if possible. That's what you want to do, so that you have a year-end closing report for that, all that roll forward. That closing report cannot be reprinted, that report as itself. You can go back and find information to be able to get it similar, but it's nice to have that one closing report that sometimes the auditors want to see. So a couple of things, we'll tidy up here. Thanks for being patient when going through all of this. Some of your prep work you can do, look at these pre-printed forms, make sure you get those ordered on time. So if you've got to print out hard copies of W-2s or the 1099s, and if you're not on the pre-printed, if you're not on the printing the ones pretty much on blank paper, make sure you get those pre-printed ones ordered and the right ones correctly. Plan on electronic filing files, okay, so that if you are going to take those, it's very easy, even if you're not at the maximum or the minimum you have. It's a lot easier to upload those files into the IRS's website or the state's website at that. Make sure you update your Social Security website password and all those sites that you have that information. Plan, okay, make sure you got a plan in place to install the updates. Okay, we are here to help you pretty much. Some clients install their own updates for the most part. Mostly, our consultants are there to usually do these year-end updates. We just need to make sure, let's schedule these out. We like to do them over the weekends or overnight, where everybody is out of the system and we're not taking down your regular work hours. So people aren't sitting around. So we're available. You do these after hours and on weekends. Let's just get those on a schedule. Review also, prep and review for any ACA data that you might need to be getting. And you can go ahead and set up your new fiscal periods in the system. That's about it as far as the end. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but hopefully you captured enough information there to kind of get you through your year-end process. If you do have any questions, please let one of our consultants know. We're here to help you. and make sure we guide you through this and make your stress level as minimal as possible during the holidays. Any questions, anybody? All right, well, there's our contact information. Pretty much if you need any help from us, you know that you can always go to our website and contact any one of the consultants through our website. Also an email, pretty much, that support@aim-technologies.com. We'll hit a number of us. So if you've got any questions with that, let us know. Of course, we're always available through the phone, pretty much through our office, or hitting directly to your consultants. Another thing with that, thank you for joining us with our skill sessions. A lot of things are out there. There's a lot of functionalities available to it. People are always asking, they want to do different things and don't realize that, you know what, maybe I should ask AIM guys first, because they kind of know what my system is, where I'm at, what I'm looking for. For the most part, you know, if you can think of it, we can build it. Alice,
Thank
anything
you.
else?
No, Buck, that was great. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. And we will be sending out the recording and the PowerPoint presentation after the call, probably tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.